We all have a deep fundamental need to belong. Whether it is to a family, a country, or a religious community, that sense of connection is often what defines our identity. But what happens when the price of belonging is your own intellectual integrity? What do you do when the community that shielded your family from persecution demands that you stop asking questions? This is the story of a man who chose exile over silence, and in doing so, he changed the way we think about God, nature, and ourselves forever. The year was 1632, and the place was Amsterdam. At the time, the city was the beating heart of the Dutch Republic, a place of incredible wealth, bustling trade, and a level of religious tolerance that was almost unheard of in the rest of Europe. It was a city of merchants, printers, and scholars. But for the Jewish community in Amsterdam, this tolerance was a fragile gift. Most of them, including the family of Baruch Spinoza, were Sephardic Jews who had fled the Iberian Peninsula to escape the horrors of the Inquisition. They had finally found a home where they could practice their faith, but that safety came with an unwritten rule: do not rock the boat. Spinoza was born into this world as a golden child of the community. His father, Michael, was a successful and respected merchant, and he made sure his son had the best education possible. Young Baruch studied the Hebrew scriptures, the intricacies of the Talmud, and the long history of Jewish scholarship. He was brilliant, curious, and by all accounts, destined to be a leader. But as he entered his late teens, that curiosity started to pull him toward dangerous shores. He began studying Latin, mathematics, and the new, radical science of the 17th century. He read the works of René Descartes, the man who famously said, "I think, therefore I am." The more Spinoza learned about the laws of physics and the logic of geometry, the more he began to see inconsistencies in the religious dogmas he had been taught. He started to wonder why a perfect, infinite God would have human emotions like anger or jealousy. He questioned why religious authorities claimed to have a monopoly on the truth when their holy books were full of contradictions. For Spinoza, the world was not a place of miracles and divine winds. It was a place of order governed by laws that could be understood through reason. By the time he was in his early 20s, Spinoza wasn't just thinking these things, he was talking about them. He began to suggest that God and nature were actually the same thing. He argued that God wasn't a king sitting on a throne in the sky, but rather the infinite substance of the universe itself. To the leaders of the Jewish community, this was more than just a philosophical disagreement. It was a threat to their very survival. They were a refugee community trying to stay in the good graces of their Dutch hosts. The last thing they needed was a young radical being accused of atheism or heresy. They tried to quiet him down first. There are stories that they even offered him a yearly pension just to keep his mouth shut and maintain a public appearance of faith. But Spinoza refused. He couldn't pretend to believe in a version of God that his reason told him was impossible. So, in 1656, when he was only 24 years old, the community took the ultimate step. They issued a sherem, which is the harshest form of excommunication. The words of the decree were brutal. He was cursed by day and cursed by night. No one was allowed to speak to him. No one was allowed to write to him. And no one was allowed to read anything he had written. In an instant, Spinoza lost everything. He lost his family, his friends, his business connections, and his entire social identity. He was a man without a country and without a people. But here is the remarkable thing about Spinoza. He didn't fight it, and he didn't fall into despair. He reportedly said that this decree did not force him to do anything he would not have done anyway. He moved away from the center of the city and took up a trade that seems almost poetic given his life's work. He became a lens grinder. He spent his days polishing glass for telescopes and microscopes, tools that helped people see the world more clearly. It was a humble, solitary life, but it gave him the one thing he valued above all else: independence. Living in small rooms, often surviving on little more than milk soup and a bit of gruel, Spinoza spent his nights writing. He turned down prestigious offers to teach at universities because he knew that a paycheck from a prince or a government would come with strings attached. He wanted to be free to follow the truth wherever it led, even if it led him into total isolation. His masterpiece, The Ethics, is one of the most challenging and profound books ever written. He wrote it in a geometric style, with definitions, axioms, and proofs, as if he were solving a massive math problem about the nature of existence. In it, He laid out a vision of a universe where everything happens by necessity. There is no free will in the way we usually think about it, because we are all part of the vast, interconnected web of cause and effect that is God or nature. For Spinoza, the path to true happiness wasn't through prayer or ritual. It was through understanding. He believed that when we understand why things happen, we stop being slaves to our emotions. We stop being angry at the storm or sad about our misfortunes, because we see them as part of a larger necessary whole. He advocated for a life of virtue guided by reason, and he was one of the first thinkers to argue for the total separation of church and state. He believed that a government's only job was to ensure the freedom of its citizens to think and speak as they chose. Spinoza died in 1677 at the age of 44. The very trade that gave him his freedom, grinding lenses, likely contributed to his death, as the glass dust he inhaled for years destroyed his lungs. He died as he lived, quietly and with dignity, surrounded by a few close friends who had remained loyal to him despite the risks. When we look back at his life, it is easy to see him as a cold, rationalist philosopher, but there is a deep emotional truth in his story. It is the story of a man who realized that the only way to be truly at peace was to be honest with himself. He showed us that intellectual courage isn't just about having big ideas. It is about being willing to stand alone when those ideas make the world uncomfortable. Today, Spinoza is remembered as one of the fathers of the Enlightenment. His ideas paved the way for modern science, secular ethics, and democratic thought. He was excommunicated by his own people and feared by the authorities of his time. Yet his vision of a universe governed by reason and a life guided by integrity has outlived every one of his critics. But what do you think? Is the price Spinoza paid too high? In a world where we are constantly pressured to fit in and follow the crowd, is it still possible to live with that kind of uncompromising honesty? Or is belonging to a community more important than the pursuit of an uncomfortable truth? It is a difficult balance to strike, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing. I have had some challenges lately, but I am committed to bringing you more stories like this one more consistently. Thank you for watching.